Hi, everybody. Welcome to Both Mics and What's Hot in Florida. We've had tremendous response from our previous meeting with Blue Crystalline Phoenix. I brought Blue back here today. So first, though, Blue, thank you for coming back and thank you for being here.
You're very welcome.
I do want to go back for somebody who maybe missed our first interview, our first meeting together. I would like to kind of recap, let people know who you are.
All right. Well, the main status of what I am and what I deal with is as such, Unified Federation President, dealing with and obtaining to extraterrestrial confidential information, exposure of the quantum age to come, and the recalibration of what needs to be placed for this timeline, and up to and including the military protocols that deal with Space Force as commander.
Okay. Now, if someone, to put it more blatant, to put it more in common, to dumb it down a little bit, I guess, would it's safe to say your being, your essence is from another place.
Yes, another timeline, if you will, the 13th dimensional terror realm. Another stasis from a hyper-divinity being and coexistent into a hypermodulus stasis of an Arcturian/Theta Reticuli being, infused into hypergenetics.
So what we would call, or what most people I know of would call an extraterrestrial, an alien being, something not of this world.
Yes, and then fusion into an in-between stasis, if you will.
Okay, so what does that part mean? Can you explain a little further?
The beings that I run and obtain with and deal with, they put on hypergenetics, not like in this current timeline. So retrofitted, we work as ground crew for those on top itinerary, which include the Zeta Reticuli, the Pleiadians, the Nordics, the Andromedans, as well as small whites, grays in certain stature, ancient Talos Society, Atlanteans, you name it. We run through them. But we are a fusion statistic, meaning we are an in-between of mankind and a hyper-terrestrial.
Okay.
So we have a different stasis of a genetic, but working through and with them on higher flotation. So it's a ground crew statistic, if you will.
Gotcha. Now I am getting notification here through our platform that your network bandwidth is low. Do you have another? Now it's peaked back up. I'll just let it keep going here. I just wanted to let you know. I don't know if there's an alternative for us if we run into a problem later.
I don't know. I mean, right now there's an itinerary placement storm coming in acquisition, so it's going to probably make the delegation. Yeah, it's going to make it up and down, unfortunately.
No worry. We'll just push through here. I did want to just let you know that. You know, I've had some interesting feedback from some listeners. I've had some questions. One of the number one questions, I find it very funny, is, do extraterrestrial beings have sex?
Well, as a fusion statistic, yes, in the way, but there are beings that don't because they are in a terragender formation, meaning like grays and other statistics, they don't have a female-male interlock. They're hyper-quality beings, either run through generics of download species like mine in infusion, or relay code through cloning. But there are species like Pleiadians that look like humans, like ourselves, or Nordics that do resonate on this terror realm, because it's not just humans that live there. There are species that look like them but resonate different. They can co-intact into a hyper wavelength.
What we're talking about here is to reproduce or multiply. It's all through cloning. It's not through general reproduction as we understand.
For fusion intermediation of a hypergenetic like myself, meaning the etherical or the aether part is infused into the genetics of a hypermolecular stasis of a hologram of this structure or similar from these type of beings that I run with. These are to help.
I think the Maitre have scrambled our signal here. Hang on here. Hang on. We'll just give it a second here.
Pause it for 1 second. Let
Sure.
me try to move location.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
We're just pausing here just a second here while we get readjusted with bandwidth here.
Any better in this spot?
It doesn't show up any better. It still says the network bandwidth is low. So we'll just keep pushing on.
Other network you can go through?
Well, it's not on my end. It says specifically on the platform, Blue Phoenix's network bandwidth is low, but now it's normal again. It's like wavering. It's kicking back and forth, but it says it's good now. I don't understand. Repeat, please, what you...
I'm just saying it because there's a storm coming in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's...
That's making it a little hard right now.
Sure. Now, you said something about the Maitre, and that's what got scrambled. Can you restate that, please?
The Maitre are certain designated species that have been on this terror realm or similar causeways of effect, but they are relative to the Zeta Reticuli and other grays, but they're not on good resonance. They are more innovation on bad cloning sequencing ways and something on a downsizing grid. You know how humans would have stated in the past preliminary how they've seen grays, they've been taken off into hypermodular stasis, but it wasn't a good thing. They were messed with in a bad way, and it gave them nightmares. These beings looked a little different than a Zeta Reticuli. You've seen the interface of what I showed you already, what they look like. The Maitre are more of a slit spectrum in the eye, though. Their face is more ocular, and they're more thinner, and they don't have a good resonance look like the Zeta do. Now, they, as humans will perceive, they have a mix-up. Humans are mixed up in between two statistics.
All right.
So relay points in that spectrum both have a different relay points of effect.
All right.
It does on our itinerary that humanity knows the truth for these things.
Now, your name intrigues me. My co-host on the Both Mics podcast has asked me, did you get the name from this specific place? He's named a book, something called Ashes of the Blue Phoenix, the Alien Love Chronicles. Are you familiar with that? Is that similar or no?
No, I can tell you the real reason our preliminary scales as of 2 years ago is obtaining to my name stature. This was a cosmic itinerary through Ashtar Command at the time. Ashtar Command is the same resonance code as the leeway points in the Unified Federation grid in the light statistic. A being of resonance who I have acquitted myself with and become into the Ashtar realms and be able to and exist and relay to what I need to for this realm, has itinerated my new name status as that. But the protocols for this is the meaning of 3 intact leeway codes for my name. Blue means BLU, protection, protecting what is right on the better causeways of effect. Crystalline means pure, the purification of light itself. Phoenix means rising from the ashes and being able to maintain what needs to be prophesized here in this realm through the sun. S-U-N.
Okay.
Those are what my names mean.
Okay. Now, it's been suggested to me recently, because I listen, I'm very open-minded about everything, and I'll listen to anything, I'll view anything. I'm very open-minded in that regard. It's been suggested to me that religion, as we know it on this earth, whether it be Christianity or whatever religion, is for the weak-minded. My question is that so? And is that based on what we had talked about previously about the not being able to release all the information to earthlings or, human beings because they wouldn't be able to handle it all? So with that in mind, is there a correlation between aliens and religion, extraterrestrials and religion, people or aethers from other timelines?
Well, the main frame of it all goes through the ancient Egypt platforms. not just dealing with the Christianity over calling codes. Hathor is one of my main signet mainframes, resonates through the Zeta Reticuli for a reason. Because if you look through the tri-pyramids of Giza and the lateral turns of certain effects there, it will show certain scepters into that wavelength. It will show the resonance of the ancient being of old Hathor. It will show the resonance of these designated beings of old of the Zeta Reticuli. It does go into that, but it does signalize a divinity calling code of a mainframe of a freedomized society of advanced statistic. Hathor's divinity runs and also through the other deities of old. And the wavelengths to the best protocol to be able to intact into a hypermolecular code is being able to reborn through that statistic. Now, rebirth on Hathor's mainframe resonated through this realm many timelines, and through those timelines were the divinity protocols that enhanced for a better Balkanization society. And humanity has the right to know that, and as well as keeping what's right and designated on source grid mainframe. Not to just take away everything out of what the Bible would have said. There are important things still in there, should always stay intact for humankind. Maybe not everything, but there are very important protocols, like maintaining life.
So with that in mind, I guess what I'm really getting at is it possible that in ancient times or many years ago, as we know it on Earth here, is it possible that people were confusing life forms or beings from other places as gods? Because there's a lot of similar stories in the Bible and in other religions. They have the similar stories. Like, for instance, the Great Flood. There's usually a Great Flood in whatever religion you're discussing. So, is it because the people of way back when didn't have a better explanation? They didn't have a full understanding?
Well, I mean, same civilization as Christ Jesus was. He's Pleiadian. He was a trimixed collateral form between a humanoid and a hyper-terrestrial being, and fused into what deity needs to be placed here, as mainly as others were as well. There were many kings, queens, ancients of old. I mean, Albert Einstein, and all even the itineraries that resonate through those were not considered a leeway point, considered all the way human. They had an intact hyper-terrestrial interload through them.
Wow.
They're amazing.
That brings me to my next point, because we have a thing on our podcast, and we're at like 120 shows on the Both Mics podcast, but we have a segment and we call it Alien Update. And what we refer to with that is Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people who have advanced our culture, advanced our civilization through technology, and obviously the Jeff Bezos. These are all people that have more money, more power, and have advanced us. And my take is, I maintain that of 7 billion people on the planet, you can't tell me these 7 or so are that much smarter than everybody else. There's either direct alien contact, or they themselves have that inside them. What is your take on those specific people I just named? Are they in a similar situation as you are? I don't know the word. Is it stasis?
All the mainframes are on directive, meaning there are elite of this planet. They're on their own directives, and by each directive, until it is finished, they acquisite what they need to through that timeline. This timeline was the main retrofitted causeway of effect for a justified new realm. That way, certain infusion beings can be placed and processed so they can put that into effect. But of some of them that you have said are not on good acquisition codes and could be on a better leeway point, like Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, and Bill Gates. Now, resonating at effect, when one is messing with hyper-technologies, they must learn to use common sense. If they cannot use common sense, they could ruin the whole spectrum of grid.
Wow. Well, that makes me feel better. It makes me feel like the last 120 episodes that I've been talking about this, that I haven't been, because I've had people accuse me of saying that I wasn't right in the head, that I had some sort of problem, that I needed to seek counseling, etc. Have you in your life had that happen to you? Have people said things like that to you?
You know, I'm on such a high calibration code that if it goes over me, it doesn't even affect me.
Yeah,
I've learned to manifest total reality of things and let those little things just swipe right on past me. And if they do affect me, it's easy for me to get over it. Not many of human calling codes can intercept this type of neurological wavelength, if you will.
You know, and that's sort of where I've come to at my point in my life as well. That was a self-realization that it really doesn't matter as long as I'm feeling that. Right. So, well, that makes me feel good as well. My next question is, we had talked briefly, and I thought you had mentioned that you had healed people directly. Can you tell me more about that? Is that something I've researched a little bit, and somebody's mentioned something called Reiki, or Reiki, R-E-I-K-I healing. Is that the same thing?
At one point in time, a few years back, about 4 years, I was advancing miraculously through that inner tone. I am way past that spectrum grid. I deal with the cosmic wave energy protocols, with the Zeta Reticuli and other intact species through the hyperdimensional wave shifts, if you will. I have put people up through their authorical encoding into these hyperstar units, being able to manipulate and so enhance their genetic encoding and able to heal it. But not all the time it has been in that retrospect, because this type of healing is a bit different than Reiki, a little more advanced. Photonically, a quantum effect goes into retrospect for hyperquantum modulated beds. This type of energy that runs through us certain beings, through the Tesla, if you will, or quantum frequencies, will help innovate that for better wavelength for humanity. But until then, between myself, others, and other hypermodulated beings, cosmic grid energy source wavelength healing energies are at a good spectrum, and they're higher than the Reiki that I had dealt with pre-limitory.
We had also discussed last interview here that med beds do exist, but they're not going to be released because of the I sensed your answer was because of the evil that still exists here on Earth. I guess we don't want that technology going into the wrong hands, or what?
I have been told on retrospect through Twitter as well, to fellow people of my own statistic, that it's not on good leeway point currently at this time. There are certain leaders in acquisition that are not making this realm on right designated interloads, and because of that, it's going to make it hard to put a quantum age into effect. For humanity to really push forward and maintain themselves, of, like I said before, said removal or integration of these infusal beings that are causing the problems has to stay and must if they want to maintain proposal of the next quantum phase wave.
We had also talked about, and I thought you had implied that you were in favor of natural remedies. For instance, and I'll throw out the biggest one, marijuana. Maybe psychedelics like mushrooms and so forth. That's become legal in some U.S. states, even for recreational or medicinal use. Are these things that can help us as a society or as a being, as a civilization, get to some other point?
I'm going to be honest with you. In retrospect, I myself as military, I do smoke weed, but that is medicinal. Okay, it's allowed in perspective, we already know. Anything else I don't touch, even alcohol. I'm vegan. Humans got to maintain this too. They got to stay away from the drugs. They got to stay away from the alcohol. They got to keep themselves maintaining better on clean motivations. I only smoke marijuana because it does me different than others. It doesn't dumb me down. It is a genetic enhancement because I'm an interfusional intermission being. Not many are like me that can enhance their core analysis like that. Much of humanity, though, if they do smoke, it doesn't do that. It causes a bad leeway. A conjuncture, if all other platonic negative effects are removed, And that type of God-given herb is placed right without stupidity. And maybe through hypergenetics, those that can maintain it to help humankind too. Just maybe that would help motivate things. But until then, there are still many who are mixing that with other things that are not good, or even taking that and they can't still maintain themselves because their genetics aren't alternated good for it.
Well, the one point I want to make, but before I do, I do want to say there's a famous instance where Elon Musk was on the Joe Rogan podcast and he was smoking weed, and we've talked about him and his impact on what's going on.
He and others, certain few others, enemies, even fusion or elite status can handle that, and it doesn't act as it bad for us. But there are a lot of humans it still does. They would dumb them down, they would fall asleep, they would forget things, they make them tired, they cause bad interloads. But that doesn't mean it couldn't be reversed.
And the reason for my question about psychedelics and like mushrooms was simply because it's been suggested to me, and through some research I've done, that I've seen the term more than once, pushes you through to the other side, puts you on another level, puts you on a different plane. So I didn't know if that had anything to do with the frequencies or wavelengths we were talking about. Did I lose you, Phoenix? Blue. And I think there she is. Let me see.
I have to go outside. I apologize.
That's okay.
Start raining any minute. I mean, there's a bad storm coming in.
No worry. We were talking about the psychedelics, and the reason I was asking that was people
We're
have
talking about the mushrooms.
Yeah. My question is does that take what we consider as humans, when I hear people relate to that as putting you on another plane, another wavelength, another just pushing you through to the other side, is what I've heard. Is that something different than what we're talking about with you?
Well, I, per se, have never tried them. I have only done weave, so I wouldn't know. Well, if you said that others are acquisiting that, yes, I mean, it is an initial God-given herb that most likely would probably uplift the neural capacity wavelengths at that standard. But as I would recommend, between that and any other type of drug, it doesn't even matter what it is, it can't be rectified on a wrong scale. There's a lot of, you get what I mean? Putting the right wavelengths for these things. Mm-hmm. You just, as long as it's placed into that itinerary right, and those that have that uplifting spectrum and genetic hyperload to intact their hypermodular status with that, yes, it can be a leeway opening for a certain portal of effect.
Now, when you and I spoke last, I believe you had mentioned something about how your family was alerted about your identity and who you really are several years ago. You also mentioned that you had several markings on your body. Can you explain both? Just revisit that first part about your family being informed, but then tell me more about those markings on your body.
Well, acquisitional effect, these said markings are laser in tune marks, a preliminary scale about 6 years of acquisitional coding ago, when my hypermodular wavelength was set up in tune frequency with the zeta reticuli. So meaning that I was physically taken up into a star unit 2 or 3 times in 1 year preliminary scale wave to enhance my core being. Now at that time, I didn't know what was going on, because through my whole lifetime experience, I kind of had it up and down on the higher terrestrials, and that time was kind of wavy. They have a needle spectrum they were diagnosing on my encoding right above my belly button, but there was also divinity encoding along with them at the time that helped place my modular being of what my hyper divinity calling code is, and he is Archangel Michael. Now the races of those intact beings are real. They run with hypermodulated races, but they're an intact in-between dimensional stasis. They can transform into other entities, or they can intact looking more alien than human when they're in their angelic divinity forms.
Well, that brings me to my next point here, because I'm curious if there's people that have been shape-shifted or what have you. Maybe these are the same people who are leaders, whether it be in our government or in the world.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that? Because you had an interesting post on Facebook where you had Kennedy with a question mark. Is that related?
Yes, that was in tune to what this podcast would be an acquisition coming up right now. Now, the Kennedys are part of the in-tune frequency overlays of those of the ancient. They are high calling codes of those replications to advance society, and people don't understand that their main and traversal wavelengths have helped throughout the ages. And especially with John F. Kennedy and Jr. Intact in retrospect, still alive, never died. There are reasons behind that as well, and innovation sequencing that will be put on preliminary scales to open up what needs to be placed on this realm.
Wow. It's funny because for the past maybe 30 years or so, I had this theory that a lot of people may be worth more dead than they are alive to our planet. And I had this little imaginary story going in my head. I was even going to write a book about it. And it was that all these people, JFK, RFK, MLK, whether it's a pop singer or what have you, these people are all worth more dead than they are alive to civilization as a whole. Is that something similar to what you're saying now? But JFK still being alive?
Death isn't a true perception of what's going on in this realm, including those on hyperemulation waves. Those are important to our itinerary. Were they ever diagnosed as a death perception? Maybe. Or were they just self-diagnosed as that to hide away to maintain themselves for what really needs to come into effect?
Before we wrap up here shortly in a couple minutes, what should we, as our civilization, what should we be doing? What should we be looking at? Are we waiting for a signal? Do we need to push ourselves in another direction?
You need to maintain yourself in a proper, better direction. And that includes motivating the well-being of what you can maintain on this realm. Humans are pushing themselves in the wrong way. And because of that, they are following the wrong types of leaders and following the wrong types of acquisitions amongst themselves. Do you really need to wear a mask to hide your beautiful face? Do you really need to intake injections that are causing things even worse to come about? And then try to hypermolecular stasis for those scientists that are doing it to mankind to think, we'll try something the same wavelength again, but different. It's still screwing it up now. Maintain yourselves. Find proper motivations. Find healthier acquisitions. Stop eating junk food too. Stop eating things that are so chemically induced they're inbounding your coding to another spectrum overload. There are healthier and better ways for humanity to maintain themselves. Not chemicals and not inducing junk food and the curriculums that don't need to be interjected for their neural capacity wavelengths. They can maintain themselves better by maintaining a higher common ethical sense for things.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Listen, Blue, I really appreciate you being here with us again. I appreciate you tolerating the intermittence or the network communication problems we had today, but I'm sure we're...
used to this type of thing.
One final question for you. Being you live in Florida, and I've been doing a lot more research lately. How familiar are you with Bob Lazar?
I believe I am not familiar at all with that.
Okay, fair enough. I'll just leave it at that. Bob Lazar is a gentleman who claims to have worked at Area 51 for a long time, and he's released a lot of information. He's had threats against him and so forth throughout his life. The government's trying to keep him down, but what he did was he outsmarted him. He released all the information, so now if he ends up dead, it's obvious that he was correct. So he kind of put them in a check situation there. But
one of the reasons why I and certain other acquisitional codes had to maintain high secrecy for things and maintain on that confidential statistic until certain acquisitions can come into effect. I know what to place out and what not to.
Awesome. Blue, I really appreciate it. I hope to get together with you again sometime. This is only going to open more questions, I'm sure. So again, I appreciate it, and I look forward to next time.
Me as well.
All right. Thank you, Blue.